They took everything from me. I had to make them pay. I had to.
It was the hardest decision I ever made. After years of pouring my soul into building a business from the ground up, I thought it was finally time to step back. I handed over everything to my son, Kevin, believing he would take the reins and continue the legacy I worked so hard to create. I trusted him completely, hoping he would honor the sacrifices that came with running the business. But what happened next changed everything. Instead of gratitude, I was met with betrayal. Kevin, with all the power now in his hands, didn't hesitate to fire me. His words, cold and final, cut deeper than any failure I'd ever faced. "You're no longer needed," he said. The world I had built, the work that had consumed me for decades, was suddenly irrelevant to him. I was cast aside like an old tool no longer fit for use. The sting of his betrayal hit harder than anything I could have imagined. But instead of letting this defeat me, I realized something. In that moment, the man who raised him, the one who poured everything into making sure he had the best life possible, was now a shadow in his eyes. And it was time to show him something he would never forget. What Kevin didn't realize was that I wasn't done yet. It wasn't about the company or the title. It was about something much deeper: respect, hard work, and the legacy of a father who would never give up on what he believed in. I spent my life working, pouring everything into the business. Each early morning, late night, I sacrificed things that most people take for granted. Simple pleasures, time with my family, moments of rest. None of them came easily for me. The business was my world, my purpose, the reason I woke up every day, and the reason I kept going when my body ached and my mind was worn. I built it from the ground up, brick by brick, not just as a way to provide for my family, but as something I could leave behind. A legacy. It was everything to me, and it became the foundation of our lives. I wanted to create something lasting, something my children, especially my son Kevin, could be proud of, something they could carry forward when I was gone. Kevin was always my pride. He was bright, ambitious, full of potential. From the moment he was born, I knew I wanted him to have everything I never did. Growing up, I didn't have much. My father worked long hours, but we never seemed to get ahead. I promised myself that my children wouldn't have to struggle like I did. And for Kevin, I worked tirelessly. I wanted him to have opportunities I could never imagine. I watched him grow up, always encouraging him to dream big, to reach for the stars. I thought, if I worked hard enough, I could give him the world. I could make up for the missed moments, the weekends I spent in the office instead of with him. He deserved the best, and I would give him everything I could. But despite all the sacrifices, something always gnawed at me. I never seemed to be enough. No matter how much I gave, it felt like there was always more expected. Kevin, my pride, my flesh and blood, always seemed distant, like there was a barrier between us that I couldn't break through. I'd come home, after a long day, tired and worn out, hoping to find comfort in a conversation or a shared moment. But Kevin was already preoccupied with his own life. He was growing up, becoming his own person, and I wasn't sure if I was still a part of that. I tried to bridge the gap with everything I had: love, time, patience. But sometimes, it felt like I was losing him. Yet I couldn't bring myself to complain. I was doing this for him. I kept reminding myself of that. Everything I did was for him, for our future, for his future. The long hours, the missed vacations, the weekends spent working instead of resting. It was all worth it, right? I kept telling myself that once Kevin took over, once he had full control of the business, it would all make sense. I could step back and enjoy the peace that I had earned. My work would be done. I could finally rest. When the time came, I thought, I was ready, I was tired. My body was tired, and my mind even more so. I had watched Kevin grow from a boy to a man, and I believed he was ready to take on the responsibility. He was sharp, capable, and had a fire in him that reminded me of when I first started out. I had worked so hard to give him the tools to succeed, to give him the knowledge I had learned the hard way. I thought he would carry the torch with pride, build upon what I had started and make it better. I imagined him standing tall, taking the reins with confidence, knowing I had his back. I had trusted him with everything I had. But what I didn't realize, what I couldn't have foreseen, was how quickly the weight of power would change him. The moment I handed over the keys to the company, the moment I signed my life's work over to him, something in Kevin shifted. I could see it in his eyes. There was a hunger there, a hunger for control, for dominance, for something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the spark I had seen when he was younger, when he talked about dreams and making a difference. This was something different. This was the hunger that came with power, with responsibility, and with a need to prove himself. I had given him everything, but somewhere along the way I lost him, and I didn't know how to get him back. The business was mine for so long. It was everything I had. Every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night was spent building it into what it was. It was the one thing I could always rely on, the one thing that kept me going when everything else seemed uncertain. But when I handed it over, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was helping Kevin become the man he needed to be, preparing him for the future. I thought he would see the value of what I had built and carry it with the same respect, the same dedication. Instead, I watched him slowly distance himself from everything I had worked for. The company that had been my life was now just a business to him, and I wasn't sure if he saw me as anything more than a relic of the past. Even as the business began to change under his leadership, I still tried to be there for him. I offered advice, but he was too proud to ask for it. Every time I suggested a change or brought up a concern, I was met with dismissal, with silence, and eventually, with a decision I never could have predicted, he fired me. My own son, the one I had trusted with everything, the one I thought I had given everything to, told me I was no longer needed. He said I had served my purpose. That was it. I couldn't believe it. I was the one who had given him this life, given him the very business he was now taking credit for, and yet here I was, standing on the outside, unwanted. I thought back to the days when Kevin was young, when we would sit together, me teaching him about life and business. I thought about how I had always tried to be there for him, how I had worked so hard so that he could have everything I never did. And now, in an instant, it all felt meaningless. All the years, all the sacrifice, the love, the effort, it didn't seem to matter to him. I had given him everything, but somehow, it still wasn't enough. The legacy I had built was now nothing more than a business, and I was just another employee to be discarded when no longer needed. But in that moment of loss, of feeling utterly betrayed, something changed inside me. It wasn't over. I had more to give. I wasn't finished. And I was about to show Kevin that there was more to success than just titles and power. There was respect, there was legacy, and there was the strength that comes from never giving up. The journey wasn't over. It had just begun. I thought the hardest part would be letting go. After all those years of hard work, of sacrifice, of pouring every ounce of energy into a business that became my life, I imagined the transition would be the hardest part, handing the keys over to my son Kevin and stepping into the background. I thought I was ready. I thought he was ready. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The moment Kevin took control of the company, I knew things would be different. I expected him to face challenges, to have doubts, even to struggle, a little. But I never imagined that what would follow would shake me to my core. I never expected him to turn his back on me so completely. At first, everything seemed fine. Kevin was taking charge, making decisions, and I stepped back as planned, allowing him to find his footing. I was proud watching him take the reins, but soon the cracks began to show. The small, subtle changes became more noticeable. The way he spoke to me started to shift, as though I was no longer someone to be respected, but rather someone who was simply in the way. The business, once a shared endeavor, slowly became Kevin's domain, and I, the one who had built it, became little more than a forgotten relic. It wasn't just the way he treated me. It was the things he said, the decisions he made. I had always been the one who cared about the company's soul, the relationships with employees, the legacy of hard work. Kevin, though, seemed only interested in the bottom line, cutting corners, making moves to look impressive, rather than building something meaningful. I tried to speak up, to offer advice. After all, I had lived through the challenges he was now facing. But every time my words fell on deaf ears. There was no room for me in his vision. At first, I told myself it was just part of the process, that this was how it was meant to be. But then it started to sting. The tension in the air, the way he dismissed me so casually, made me question everything I had worked so hard to create. It was one of those late afternoons as I walked into the office that I began to feel the full weight of the change. Kevin had called a meeting, but when I arrived, the room was filled with a sense of coldness. There was an energy in the air that I couldn't shake, a feeling that something was wrong. I didn't know it then, but this was the moment I would realize the betrayal that was already unfolding. I walked into that meeting, ready to offer my support, only to find myself on the receiving end of a decision that I never saw coming. Kevin's eyes, once full of admiration and respect, now held an unmistakable hardness. It was as if I was just another problem that needed solving. He told me without any sign of remorse that I was no longer needed. He fired me just like that. No warning, no appreciation, just a cold, calculated decision. My own son, the one I had worked for, sacrificed for, poured my heart into, had cast me aside like a piece of old furniture that no longer had a place in the house. His words were sharp, matter of fact. "Dad, it's time to step aside. I've got this. You've done enough. You don't need to be here anymore." It was as if everything I had done, everything I had given to him and to the company, meant nothing. In that moment, it was clear. I was no longer relevant. The legacy I had fought for, the company that had been my life's work, was now Kevin's. But there was no gratitude, no recognition of the years of sacrifice. Instead, there was a cold finality to his words, a sense of superiority that I wasn't prepared for. I stood there in silence, unable to process what was happening. The room felt like it was spinning. My thoughts were a blur. I wanted to say something, to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. I had spent my whole life building something, only for him to discard me as if I was just another cog in the machine. How could this be happening? How had it come to this? Kevin, my son, the person I trusted with everything, had taken the one thing I had worked so hard for and tossed it aside. For a moment, I wanted to lash out, to tell him how much he had hurt me, how much I had done for him, how I had always been there for him, but I stayed quiet, my heart heavy with a pain I couldn't even begin to put into words. I walked out of that meeting, my head down, my body numb. The office that had once felt like home now felt alien to me, as though I no longer had a place in it. I had given everything for this business, and now I was being told to leave. But what hurt even more than the rejection was the realization that Kevin didn't seem to care. He didn't seem to understand the magnitude of what he had done. It wasn't just about losing a job or a title. It was about losing the respect, the bond that we had built over the years. I had given him everything, but it wasn't enough. I had worked so hard to make sure he had the opportunities I never had, to make sure he wouldn't face the same struggles I did. And yet here he was with all the power, and he didn't see it. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to make sense of everything. How could I have misjudged him so badly? How could I have been so blind to the person he was becoming? I thought back to when he was a child, to the dreams he had, the moments we shared. How had we gone from that to this? How had we gone from a father and son working side by side to strangers? But as the days went by, something else started to happen inside me. The sting of betrayal began to turn into something else, something stronger. It wasn't anger, it was determination. Kevin thought he could replace me, that he could run the company without me, but he didn't know what it took to build something from nothing. He didn't understand the heart of the business, the sacrifices that went into it. And now he was about to learn the hard way. As the days passed, the realization settled in. I had been cast aside, but I was far from finished. I wasn't done. If Kevin thought he could push me out and erase everything I had done, He was sorely mistaken. I had worked too hard, fought too much to let him take everything I had built and tarnish it. If he wanted to learn a lesson in respect, I was going to make sure he got it, no matter what it took. What he didn't understand was that this wasn't just about the business. This was about family, about trust, about respect. And he was about to learn that nothing worth having comes easily. If he wanted to prove himself, he would have to do it on his own. And he would have to learn the lessons I had learned the hard way. And that's exactly what I was going to show him. I couldn't believe it. How could he do this? How could Kevin, my own flesh and blood, the son I had raised and nurtured, turn on me in such a callous way? I spent my whole life building something, pouring every ounce of effort and heart into the company, and now he was discarding me as if I was some stranger, someone who never mattered. The weight of the betrayal hit me like a hammer, crushing everything I had worked for. How did we get to this point? How had the bond we shared for so many years turned into this cold, heartless act? All the late nights I stayed awake, all the sacrifices I made, every missed birthday, every moment I couldn't be there for him, was it all for nothing? I had always known how much effort and attention it took to run a business, but what struck me most was how quickly Kevin seemed to forget that. It wasn't about being in charge. It wasn't about making bold decisions or looking good on paper. It was about understanding the delicate balance of the people who made the business run, the employees, the clients, the partnerships. Kevin was so focused on the outward appearances of success, on the metrics and the power he thought came with being the boss, that he had forgotten the heart of the business, the relationships. That's where I came in. That's where I had always excelled. Building relationships, gaining trust, listening, and knowing the ins and outs of every part of the company. And in that moment, as I watched my own venture slowly grow and flourish, I realized just how much of that foundation Kevin lacked. At first, I had been content to watch from the sidelines, telling myself I had no place in the company anymore. But as the weeks went on, I started to notice the small cracks in Kevin's leadership. He was making decisions that I would never have made, cutting corners, dismissing long-standing employees, trying to push through changes that weren't well thought out. All of it started to add up. And as much as it hurt to admit, it was clear. Kevin was floundering. He was trying to run a company that was built on principles he didn't understand, and the damage was becoming apparent. The employees who once respected him began to leave. The clients who had been loyal for years began to pull away, and the numbers, those crucial numbers that defined the company's success, were slipping. Meanwhile, my own business was quietly growing. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it was steady. I had built a strong foundation based on the principles I had always believed in: hard work, respect, trust, and dedication. I knew how to build a business from the ground up. I knew how to nurture it, how to cultivate relationships with clients and employees, how to lead by example. It wasn't about being in charge or having the title. It was about understanding that leadership comes from within, from showing people the value of what you do, from earning their respect every day. And as my own venture started to thrive, I couldn't help but reflect on the years I had spent building the company Kevin now led. What I had given him was the tools to succeed, but I had also given him a false sense of confidence. I had shown him the path, but he had strayed from it, and now I was watching him falter, and I realized that despite everything, I had always been the driving force behind that company. I had been the one who made it work. I had been the one who understood the people, the ones who kept everything running smoothly. It wasn't a moment of anger that I felt, though, rather it was a strange clarity. I realized that Kevin hadn't just underestimated me as a father or as a mentor. He had underestimated the very essence of the business itself, the things that I had put in place to ensure its survival. I had always been more than just an employee or a manager. I had been the backbone, the one who kept everything connected. And now, as the company struggled without me, it became painfully clear that the company wasn't just about the products or services, it was about the heart behind it, the drive, the values, and the leadership that I had instilled in it. Looking at my own success, the growing business that was taking shape, I finally understood the full extent of what had happened. Kevin thought he could simply replace me, step into the role I had held for decades and make everything work as if it were all about numbers and titles. But he had missed the point entirely. He had taken the easy way out, relying on what he thought was power, when in reality, true power came from understanding the people you worked with, understanding the business, and respecting the effort that had come before you. In that moment of clarity, I realized that I wasn't just building a business again. I was rebuilding a part of myself. When I had handed over the company to Kevin, I thought I was stepping aside to enjoy my later years, to give him the opportunity to take control and carry on the legacy, but I hadn't realized how much I had let go of in the process. In letting go of the company, I had let go of a part of myself, a part of my identity that had been shaped by decades of hard work and sacrifice. Now, as I watched my own business take off, I began to understand that I wasn't finished yet. I still had something to offer. I wasn't just a relic of the past. I was the one who had built the foundation, and I still had the knowledge and experience to keep building, to keep growing. Kevin's mistakes were becoming more apparent by the day, but I wasn't going to wait around to watch him crash and burn. I wasn't going to sit back and let the company I had created fall apart simply because he hadn't yet learned what it truly took to lead. Instead, I took a deep breath, knowing that the time had come for me to show him exactly what it meant to be a leader, to run a business with integrity, and to earn respect. It wasn't about revenge or proving I was right. It was about showing Kevin what I had always known, that leadership is earned, not given. That real success comes from humility, from understanding the sacrifices that have been made before you, and from knowing that the work is never truly done. My business wasn't just a job. It was a legacy, and I wasn't about to let anyone, especially my own son, forget that. I had nothing to lose. At that moment, it hit me all at once. I had given everything to build a future for Kevin, only to be tossed aside. But now, as I watched him flounder in the company I had worked my whole life to create, I realized that the only thing left to do was take control of my own destiny. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about reclaiming a title or any superficial validation. It was about something far deeper. It was about showing Kevin who I really was, not just as his father, but as the man who had built everything he now took for granted. It was about teaching him the true meaning of leadership, respect, and hard work, lessons that I had tried to instill in him for years but that he had refused to learn. For the first time in a long while, I felt clear-headed, certain about what needed to be done. The company I had handed over to Kevin was failing, crumbling under the weight of his inexperience, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But in my heart, I knew that the only way to fix what had gone wrong was to show him, through action, not words, that I was not some relic from the past to be discarded. I had a fire in me again, a fire I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't a fire fueled by anger or resentment. It was a fire that came from knowing exactly who I was, from understanding that I was capable of so much more than I had allowed myself to believe. So I took the first step. I decided to take action, to do something that would force Kevin to realize that I was far from finished. I wasn't going to wait for him to come around, to realize on his own what he had lost. I would show him, and I knew the only way to do that was to prove it with my own success. I began by focusing everything on my new venture. In a quiet corner of the city, away from the chaos Kevin was creating, I started to build something that could stand on its own. My business was small, still a work in progress, but I had the knowledge, the resources, and the connections to make it succeed. I wasn't trying to compete with Kevin. I didn't need to. What mattered was that I was doing something he hadn't counted on. I was taking control of my own life again, and I was making it work. I put my heart into it, just like I had with the original company. I poured my experience, my insight, and my understanding of the business world into every decision I made. It wasn't just about the clients or the profits, it was about building something that reflected who I was, who I had always been. It was about showing Kevin that success wasn't handed to you. It had to be earned through dedication, through understanding what truly mattered. I knew that he had never truly understood that, That he thought success was about the outward show, the flashy meetings, the titles, the power. He didn't realize that true success came from within, from the quiet hours spent building trust, from the respect earned over years of hard work. I knew that if I could make this new business work, it would be the ultimate proof of that. And then, the results began to speak for themselves. The clients I had been able to secure were loyal, not because of some grand gesture or promise, but because they knew they could trust me. I wasn't just selling a product or a service, I was offering something far more valuable: integrity, respect, and a commitment to doing things the right way. The business began to grow, slowly but steadily. Every success felt like a small victory, a sign that my years of experience, the lessons I had learned along the way, were still relevant. Each new client was another reminder that I had been right all along, that what I had built had value, and that I could still contribute to the world in meaningful ways. But I knew that the real test wasn't just in the success of my new business. It was in how Kevin would respond to it. It was only a matter of time before he would realize that what I was doing wasn't just a fluke. The more I succeeded, the more he would have to confront the reality that he had made a grave mistake, and I was ready for that moment. I had been patient, I had worked quietly in the background, and now it was time for him to see the truth for himself. There were days when doubts crept in, when I questioned whether this was the right path, when the pressure of building something from scratch seemed almost too much to bear. But every time I felt that way, I reminded myself why I was doing it. I wasn't just building a business, I was building a legacy that would outlast both Kevin and me. I was showing him that success wasn't about throwing people away when they were no longer convenient. Success was about building something lasting, about treating people with respect, about never giving up no matter the odds. And that was the lesson I was going to make him learn. The thought of Kevin seeing what I was doing, seeing me succeed, in a way he never thought possible, was what kept me going. I wasn't going to let his betrayal be the end of me. I was going to use it as the fuel to show him exactly who I was, what I had built, and what he had lost. And I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, but when it did, everything changed. I remember the moment clearly, sitting at my desk late one evening going over numbers, when the realization hit me. My business was not just surviving, it was thriving. The momentum had shifted. In a matter of months, I had transformed my small venture into something that was turning heads in the industry. Clients I had been courting were now signing long-term contracts. My reputation, built on trust, respect, and integrity, had gained traction. And then came the phone call. It was Kevin. For the first time in what felt like years, he was reaching out to me. The tone of his voice was different, tentative, almost apologetic. He wanted to meet. I knew this moment was inevitable. He had seen my success. He had heard the rumors. He knew that what I was doing was more than just a side project. It was a thriving business that was making waves. And now he had no choice but to face it. I agreed to meet him, though I wasn't sure what to expect. Would he come with an apology? Or would he try to justify his actions, as he had done before? I had no idea, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the man he had fired, the man he had underestimated. I was someone different now, stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever to prove my worth. We met in a small cafe, one of our old spots where we used to sit for hours and talk about the future. But now the atmosphere was different. Kevin walked in, his face etched with concern, and sat down across from me. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Instead, he looked me in the eyes and said, "I've made a mess of things, Dad. I can't fix it on my own." For a moment, I said nothing. The old anger, the hurt, all of it swelled up inside me, but I kept it in check. This wasn't the time for vengeance. This was the time for clarity. "I know," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. "You've learned a hard lesson, but you're not going to fix this by pretending it didn't happen. You need to understand what you've done, not just to me but to the company you took over. Power doesn't come from a title, it comes from respect, and respect is earned. He nodded, his eyes filled with remorse. "I see that now," he said quietly. "I underestimated you, and I was wrong. What you built, I see it now. I see how much I took for granted." That moment in that small cafe was the turning point. Not just for Kevin, but for me as well. I had shown him the power of persistence, the importance of respecting the past while building for the future, and in that moment, I knew we had crossed a threshold, one that would change both our lives forever. The moment Kevin came to me, eyes wide with regret, I knew things had changed. He had finally come to terms with what he had done, and the weight of his mistakes was visible on his face. For so long, I had tried to teach him the value of hard work, respect, and the importance of the family legacy we had built together. But it wasn't until he saw my own business thrive, until he witnessed the results of my dedication, that he truly understood the lessons I had been trying to impart. In that moment, as he sat across from me, humbled and apologetic, I could see the man he was becoming. He had grown up in front of me, right there in that cafe, in the same way I had once learned from my own mistakes. It wasn't just about the company anymore, about the power dynamics or the control we fought for. It was about something much deeper. It was about respect. It was about recognizing the sacrifices that had been made and understanding that real leadership comes not from the title or the position, but from how you treat the people who help you get there. I realized in that moment that my job as a father had never really been about handing over the reins or passing on a legacy in a material sense. My true job was teaching Kevin to be the kind of man who understood the value of what we had built, who understood that the true strength of any business lies in the relationships, the trust, and the mutual respect between people. Kevin's words were quiet but full of meaning. "I was wrong, Dad. I didn't realize what I had. I didn't understand how much you sacrificed, how much you put into building this company. I was so caught up in the idea of being in control that I lost sight of what really mattered." The sincerity in his voice made me realize just how much he had changed. It wasn't just an apology. It was an awakening. He wasn't the arrogant, dismissive son I had once seen take control of the company with no appreciation for what it represented. This was a son who had learned painfully and slowly that success wasn't something that could be taken for granted. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief, of peace. It wasn't about the business anymore, or even about what I had built. It was about the relationship we were rebuilding, the connection that had been broken, and the growth we both had undergone. I didn't need to prove anything to Kevin anymore. I didn't need to show him I was capable of running a business. I had already done that. What mattered was that we were on the same page now, understanding each other in a way we hadn't before. I looked at him and said, "I've always been proud of you, Kevin. I still am. But it wasn't just about handing you the company. It was about teaching you the right way to lead, the right way to treat the people around you, and the right way to respect what's been built before you. I had to show you, not just tell you, that real leadership comes from within. You've learned that now, and that's more important than anything I could have ever handed over to you." There was a long pause, and then Kevin spoke again, his voice stronger, more certain this time. "I know, Dad, and I want to make it right. I want to rebuild what we had. I want to take what you've taught me and carry it forward, not just for the business, but for the family. You've always been my role model, and I see now how much you sacrificed for me and for all of us. I'm ready to do the work now, to be the leader I should have been all along." Hearing those words I had longed to hear for so many years, filled me with an overwhelming sense of pride. It wasn't just about the apology. It was about his understanding of the bigger picture. Kevin had finally seen the importance of respecting the foundation that had been laid, of recognizing that there was more to life than titles and power. He had learned that success is not a solitary pursuit. It's a journey that requires humility, collaboration, and the willingness to understand the people who helped you along the way. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Rebuilding trust takes time, and there were still many lessons to be learned, many moments to be shared. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. We were no longer trapped in the cycle of resentment and hurt. We had broken free of that. The company wasn't just mine anymore. It wasn't even just Kevin's. It was ours. Ours to rebuild, to nurture, and to grow together. As I looked at Kevin, I could see the determination in his eyes, the commitment to doing things differently this time. I knew that he was ready to take on the responsibility not just of the business but of our family's legacy. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could step back and trust him to do it. I had shown him what it meant to truly lead. Now, it was his turn to carry that forward, to pass it on to the next generation. And that's when I realized something else. My journey, my story, wasn't over. I didn't have to let go completely. I could still be a part of the business, a part of the legacy, but in a different way. I had done what I set out to do. I had taught Kevin the lessons he needed to learn. And now, I could be there for him in a different capacity. Not as a competitor, not as someone holding on to the past, but as a mentor, as a father who had passed down the most important thing of all, wisdom. In the end, I didn't just show Kevin how to run a business. I showed him the value of respect, hard work, and family. And in doing so, I rediscovered my own worth, my own place in this world. It wasn't about titles. It was about the relationships we build, the values we uphold, and the legacy we leave behind. Not just in the businesses we create, but in the lives we touch. And now, as Kevin and I looked toward the future together, I knew that no matter what came next, we had both grown stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely? Someone you worked tirelessly for, only to have them turn their back on you when you needed them the most? It's a feeling that cuts deep, one that leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty, love, and respect. But what would you do if you found yourself in that situation? Would you walk away, or would you find the strength to rise above it and prove that you're not done yet? I know what it feels like to be cast aside, to be made to feel invisible by someone you love. But I also know that there's a power in perseverance, in standing up for yourself and showing the world what you're really made of. In my own journey, I found that the key to overcoming betrayal is not about seeking revenge, but about proving to yourself that you can still build something meaningful, that you are stronger than any setback life throws your way. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to deal with betrayal? How did you handle it? Did it change the way you look at trust and relationships? Share your story in the comments below, and let's support each other in learning how to rise above the challenges life puts before us. And if you're inspired by this story and want to hear more about personal growth, resilience, and the power of perseverance, make sure to like this video and subscribe. I've got more stories coming your way that will remind you that no matter what happens, you're never truly out of the fight. Keep moving forward and always remember your story isn't over yet.